Hi everybody. In today's video I am going to lecture about carbohydrate digestion and absorption. Here we see that a woman is eating a sandwich and the bread contains starch. And the starch is made of basically two types of glucose polymer. One is amylose and another is amylopectin. And amylose is a linear chain glucose polymer, and the two glucose are linked together by alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond. And in case of amylopectin is also a linear glucose polymer with branched chain, and this linear glucose polymer, two glucose are linked together alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds, and in case of branched chain, two glucose polymer are linked together by alpha 1,6 glycosidic bonds. So let's see what will happen when we take carbohydrate like starch. So when we take starch or carbohydrate, the teeth break down the food and salivary gland release saliva, and tongue mix the saliva with foods and lubricate the foods, and salivary glands also release enzyme, that is salivary alpha amylase, and which break down the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds. So in the mouth, carbohydrate is partially digested. When the partially digested food move to the stomach, right? If we zoom the stomach, we see that this is stomach. When this food comes into the stomach, the salivary alpha amylase is no longer active. This is due to the acidic environment of the stomach. In acidic environment, salivary amylase is inactive. So carbohydrate digestion is not occur in the stomach. Then the food enter into the small intestine. So this is small intestine. This is pancreas. So in the small intestine, pancreas release pancreatic alpha amylase, and this pancreatic alpha amylase also break down the alpha 1,4 glycosidic link of the starch molecules. So if we zoom the small intestine, if we zoom this further, we see that this is the lumen, and this is the cell line of the lumen, and this cell line called enterocytes. So when food come into the lumen of the small intestine, the enterocytes contains some enzyme, some brush border enzymes like maltase and sucrase, and this maltase hydrolyzes the maltose. Maltose is a two glucose molecules, and this maltase hydrolyze the maltose and convert into two glucose molecules. And another brush border enzyme like sucrase also break down the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds and alpha 1,6 glycosidic bonds. So at the end, all the starch converted into glucose molecules. Now in the lumen, sodium ions are present in the lumen, and there on the top of the enterocytes there is a co-transporter, and this is known as sodium glucose linked transporter, and this is a co-transporter. So one glucose molecule enter into the enterocytes with two sodium ions. So now glucose are in the enterocytes, and there is another transporter in the enterocyte cell, which is known as GLUT2 transporter. This is GLUT2 transporter. So then the glucose molecule enter into the blood vessel, this is blood vessel, through GLUT2 transporter. So now glucose molecule enter into the cell and utilized by the tissue. Now not all of the glucose or not all of the starch are digested in the small intestine. The starch which are not digested in the small intestine, then enter into the large intestine. Large intestine also known as colon. So if we zoom the large intestine, we see that this is the colon cell of the large intestine. This is the mucus layer. So the undigested food, also known as resistant starch, when the undigested food which are not digested in the small intestine then enter into the large intestine, and in the large intestine microorganisms are present in the large intestine. So the undigested food then fermented by the microorganism and produce short chain fatty acid, and this short chain fatty acid then taken up by the colon cell and then it enter into the blood vessel. So this is the overall view that how carbohydrates are digested and absorbed into the body. So the summary is carbohydrate the digestion of carbohydrate starch in the mouth by salivary amylase, but the salivary amylase is no longer active in the stomach due to the acidic environment. Then the food enter into the small intestine, and in the small intestine pancreas release alpha amylase. This alpha amylase break down the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds, and in the lumen of the small intestine there are two types of brush border enzyme also released. One is maltase, another is sucrase. Maltase break down the maltose and convert it into glucose, and sucrase break down the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds and also alpha 1,6 glycosidic bonds. And in the lumen there is sodium ion present in the lumen, and there is a co-transporter known as sodium glucose link transporter, and one glucose molecule enter into the cell with two sodium ions. And there is also a GLUT2 transporter which is present in the basal surface of the enterocytes, and glucose molecule enter into the blood through GLUT2 transporter. Now not all of the starch are digested in the small intestine, so the undigested starch then enter into the large intestine, and in the large intestine microorganisms are present. So the undigested starch then fermented by the microorganism and produce short chain fatty acid, and this short chain fatty acid then enter into the taken up by colonal cell. So this is the overall view how carbohydrate digest and absorb. Thank you.